Hey, well, good day and welcome to Suffolk Park. Suffolk Park, like many industrial areas around the country, is a hive of activity with large warehouses storing volume, moving volume, and getting the customer what they need on time, at the right quality, at the right price point. One of the things I wanted to do was to take a few moments to talk about digital transformation and change. When we think about digital transformation and change, quite often what we imagine is a journey. We're going to start in one location, and a number of years later, we're going to get to the end of this transformational journey. And I'd like to argue that more often than not, for most companies, we're going to start on a journey and it's going to be continuous. And the reason for that continuous journey is not only because the technology is ever evolving, but it's also because the business is ever changing. Our customers have new demands, the way in which we operate changes, and therefore we have to continuously adjust what it is that we're doing in order to meet that new operational reality. When I think about this, I therefore am forced into a process of thinking about a continuum, a sort of a spectrum, as it were, of where the change might sit. And when I reflect upon the notion of a continuum, I not only see a breadth of capabilities, but I also see a depth of different parts of the business that could be at different stages of the journey. So when we think about large multinational organizations, we could have components that are heavily digitized and heavily automated. And that could be, for example, the finance department. And we could have the same business with hugely manual processes, which could be in the realms of demand planning or forecasting or labor planning or whatever. So in the same business, we can be in different parts of the continuum as we move. But let's reflect first on what that continuum might be. So from my perspective, the first area that I see in the continuum is the notion of emerging. I see people move from emerging into a world of developing, and then stepping from a world of developing into a world of automation, and then maybe moving from automation into a fully unified situation. Each one of those distinct stages has a number of different symptoms, as it were, that would give you a feel for where you are on that journey. But in broad order, if we think about emerging, what we mean is predominantly on-prem, probably using a lot of manual processes. When we think about developing, we're moving from being on-prem to using more cloud-based services, and we're using more advanced capabilities. When we think about moving into the world of autonomous, then we see a lot of the business logic, a lot of the decisions that we're taking are now being taken without human interaction. And then the final stage of unified. In this notion here, what we have is an entire end-tier supplier integration, and we have lots of people working across the supply chain in a collaborative way. Now, my intent is to take each one of those in turn and discuss them in a bit more detail. The world of emerging, it feels really comfortable. It's like an old pair of training shoes. We know what they are, they're okay, we know what we're all doing, and everybody feels comfortable. And therefore it is hard sometimes when you're in the emerging world to be able to understand what the future could look like. And it's really hard to imagine where the return of investment is going to be from the finance perspective, where the return of investment is going to be from an operational perspective, and ultimately trying to work out whether it's going to be worth the squeeze to be able to go through the digital transformation in the first place. So let's talk about some symptoms. In the emerging world, we're going to have a lot of pain, and a lot of the pain is stuff that we maybe tolerate. So for example, our customer orders could still be getting sent in via email. We could be dealing with multiple different brokers for freight forwarding, with hundreds of different emails for customer orders, shipment manifest, tax reconciliation, etc., all being brought in via email. And we're having to download all of that information manually from our Microsoft Outlooks into our Excel documents, and then using those Excel documents to understand what's happening. And of course, every part of the business has its own Excel spreadsheets and its own ways of trying to manage its information. So for instance, we might be doing labor planning on Excel on the one side, we might have another part of the business that's doing demand planning, we might be doing demand sensing, all of which is being done with different data sets, all of which is being done within Excel. And to make sense of any of that, we have to bring all the data together into another Excel document, cleanse the data, run our pivot tables, and try to make sense of the information that we have in order to present that information to the senior leadership team More often than not, what we're going to do is create our little pretty pie charts via Excel again, place it into PowerPoint and go and present it to the board. The challenge with all of that though, is that if something changes, if something happens, if we end up with an issue, it's really difficult to be able to take any action. The pain point is this: you can't respond very easily to change. You can't be flexible enough in order to maintain resilience. Whenever a situation goes fundamentally wrong, it can take days, if not weeks, to be able to get into a position of understanding what the implications are before you can even start to take meaningful action in order to address those issues. Now, the world of emerging was identified as painful but comfortable. The world of developing is painful and uncomfortable and indeed very frustrating. It is the world of automation that starts to feel a bit more like that utopia that you were promised. Now, when we start to think about what companies are fully autonomous, the best example that I can give you is Amazon.com. Now, Amazon itself still uses Excel. Of course it does. It still uses whiteboards, it still has magnets, and it uses all of those things at different parts of the business. However, the vast majority of decisions, for example, in the retail procurement team are automated, meaning there's no need for a human to work out how many PlayStations we're likely to require for Christmas, or how many of a particular SKU that we need to either increase the numbers of or reduce the numbers that we have in stock based upon demand sensing and consumer behavior. That's all fully automated. Similarly, if we have an issue arise and we need to have a degree of agility, so for example, maybe a customer order is going to be delayed as a result of a weather issue, then the system will autonomously either update the customer that there's going to be a delay, or alternatively, and better, it will find a different method of moving that volume to the end customer so that the end customer doesn't experience any interruption to their supply chain. So that world of automation requires a number of fairly critical steps. In the first instance, we need to have transitioned to using more advanced planning capabilities, such as we started to procure in the world of developing. We need to develop the right skill sets in order to understand how these capabilities can be used and operated across the business. But more than that, we need to start codifying much of the tribal knowledge that we discussed in the world of emerging. We need to start to understand the so what behind the data. But in order to get there, several things have to happen. In the first instance, we need to have gone through the developing phase where we have moved from the predominantly on-prem, old-school technology stacks that we had in the world of emerging into using more advanced, more capable, cloud-based planning capabilities and other business tools that are helping us drive better and data-driven decisions into the business. But we also now need to capture all of that tribal knowledge that we had in the world of emerging that we discussed. The ideas of the so what do you do as a business in order to respond to the change? What do you do with the data? What do you do with the outcome of the planning information? So all of those factors need to be codified. And as we start to codify those particular factors, what we start to get are automated decisions. We really want intelligence. And what I mean by intelligence is that I want the data with context. I want to understand what the data picture is telling me. Don't tell me that I have 200 of a particular SKU. Tell me that 200 of a particular SKU represents about 20% of the current demand. Give me more information so that I can understand what's going on, so that I can then make better and more informed decisions. But if I can make better and more informed decisions with colored data, I can make even better decisions if you provide me with recommendations up front. So making best use of the artificial intelligence available to us, rather than simply giving me raw information or raw intelligence, why don't you also help me interpret that information? Why don't you also help me by giving indications as to what actions I should take in order to be able to address the problems? And it could be something as simple as changing the mode of transport that I'm using, or it could be something as simple as changing how I move volume around my network in order to enhance the truck fill rates or to improve the customer experience. The next area of automation is moving into a situation where we can start to, maybe a bit like the sort of cruise control in our cars, start to be able to sort of get into a position where the vehicle can hold a constant speed, which is useful. The adaptive cruise control being better in the sense that it's able to respond to the traffic in front of us, but we really want to move towards the more Tesla-esque self-driving capabilities where we can, supervise the vehicle whilst it's responding to the various situations. So when we think about supervising the supply chain, being a little bit more hands-off, in those instances, the system could, for example, respond to some real-world problems autonomously. That starts to help our customers to understand the implications, but it also means that we can focus on the bigger problems. So what that means in this world of unified, though, is that it means we have an opportunity to start to create things like a recognized supply picture across our supply base. We start to be able to share production data. We start to be able to coordinate global transportation. We start to be able to look at supply risk, not by passing risk on from one part of the situation to the other, but holistically supply risk so that we can help manage everybody's risk. So in those cases, what we're actually recognizing is having this unified supply chain means that we're working collaboratively, we're sharing information effectively, we're coordinating activity together, we're sharing the risk together, and we're starting to get to a situation where we can meet both the legislative requirements, visibility of our products, etc., and we can also reduce the potential burden that we place upon each other as we try to work together with things like inventory management and coordination. So that ability to move into this unified world is as much about culture. It's as much about identifying the fact that we can actually achieve better together, where we can coordinate our activity more effectively together, where we can actually drive genuine operational enhancements across the entire operation if we all simply work more firmly and we also share risk more amicably across the supply network. So I hope that's been an interesting conversation around supply chain automation. And if you've got any comments or any suggestions for me, then please, go ahead and put them into the box. Thanks very much.